My name is Megan, and I lived with my parents in a lovely two-story home until I was 10 years old. Because Dad was from a wealthy family, we never had to worry about anything. Dad didn't seem to care that Mom was different. She hailed from a humble family. In any case, he loved her, or did until he learned about Robert. I can still clearly recall the day that everything broke down. I heard them fighting in Dad's study as I was seated at the kitchen table using a spoon to push my cereal around. Mom had spent months, if not more, with Robert. She had begun working part-time to support herself at her real estate career where she met him. At any rate, she told Dad that. "How could you do this to us?" The sound of Dad's words echoed through the walls. It was the most hurtful sound I had ever heard him make. Mom pleaded, "James, please, we can work this out. Think about Megan." Things were extremely bad at that point. Mom wanted a sizable alimony payout, the house, and primary custody of me. On the phone, I heard her telling her sister that she should be paid for all the years she had worked. It didn't sit well with Dad. He threatened her one evening, "I'll file a countersuit for your infidelity if you take this to court, Sarah. Is it truly your intention to pay me for your enjoyment?" From then on, Mom easily gave in. Ultimately, Dad was granted primary custody of me and the house. But he wasn't attempting to prevent me from seeing Mom. He immediately arranged weekend visits. Almost immediately after the divorce was finalized, Mom married Robert and moved into a tiny apartment across town. She became pregnant within months, so I suppose they were rushing. I didn't beg for my infant half-brother. As planned, I attempted to visit on the weekends, but it was terrible. Unlike our home, the flat was small and claustrophobic. Robert made it plain that I wasn't welcome, and Mom was constantly preoccupied with the baby. Every time I arrived, his face would contort into this irritated expression, but he never said anything directly. He would sigh deeply as he went about, as if my very existence was wearing him out. As soon as I entered their flat on Saturday morning, I should have seen something wasn't right. Instead of their typical artificial politeness, Mom and Robert were being truly friendly. I hadn't seen Robert smile since their wedding day, but he did it now. Mom remarked, "Megan, sweetheart," as she gave me a strong hug as the baby was balanced on her hip. "We've been talking, and we think it's time we spent more quality time together as a family." I stood there awkwardly, my weekend overnight bag clutched to my chest, trying to process this sudden change. The apartment even smelled different, like freshly baked cookies instead of the usual musty diaper smell. Actually, Robert chimed in, setting down his coffee mug. "We were hoping you might want to stay with us for a few days. Maybe get to know your little brother better." Despite my better judgment, a tiny spark of hope flickered in my chest. Maybe they really did want to make things better. Maybe Robert had finally accepted me as part of the family. That's when the other shoe dropped. "We found this amazing last-minute deal for a weekend getaway," Robert said, suddenly very interested in his phone screen. "Just 2 days. You're old enough to watch Tommy while we're gone, right?" The cookie I'd just bitten into turned to ash in my mouth. "What?" "It's just for the weekend, sweetie," Mom rushed to explain. "Tommy's such an easy baby, and you're so mature for your age. We'll leave you money for food and all the emergency numbers." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They hadn't wanted to spend time with me at all. They just needed a free babysitter. The same baby they'd barely let me near for months. They now wanted to leave alone with me for an entire weekend. "But I've never taken care of a baby before," I protested, my voice shaking. "I don't know how to." "Oh, it's easy," Mom waved off my concerns. "He's sleeping through the night now, mostly, and you're so good with him." I wasn't good with him. They'd never even given me a chance to be around him. My hands started trembling, and I did the only thing I could think of. I excused myself to the bathroom and called Dad. What happened next was like watching a tornado tear through the apartment. Dad called Mom's phone immediately, and even through the bathroom door, I could hear his voice booming through the speaker. "Have you lost your mind, Sarah? Leaving two minors alone for days. What the hell are you thinking? James, you're overreacting." Overreacting? I'll tell you what's overreacting. When I call Child Protective Services and tell them you're abandoning your children for a weekend getaway. How does that sound? Want to risk losing custody of both kids? The apartment went deadly quiet after that. When I finally emerged from the bathroom, Mom was sitting on the couch, her face white as a sheet. Robert was pacing in the kitchen, muttering under his breath about overprotective ex-husbands and ruined plans. I didn't say goodbye when I left. I couldn't bear to look at Mom's face, the mixture of embarrassment and anger that flashed across it when she realized I'd told Dad everything. As I waited outside for Dad to pick me up, I could hear them arguing through the thin apartment walls. When Dad finally pulled up, I practically ran to the car, slamming the door perhaps a little harder than necessary. "You okay, kiddo?" Dad asked softly as we pulled away from the curb. I nodded, but we both knew I was lying. The hope I'd felt earlier had curdled into something bitter and cold. They hadn't wanted to bond with me or build a relationship. They just wanted a free babysitter. So they could go on vacation after the babysitting incident. I couldn't look at Mom the same way. Our weekend visits turned into video calls, which honestly wasn't much better. Every time Mom and I tried to have a real conversation, Robert would materialize in the background like an annoying ghost. "Sarah, the baby needs feeding." He'd interrupt, hovering behind Mom's shoulder. Or, "Honey, I'm starving. What's for dinner?" Or my personal favorite, "The baby's being fussy. We should probably end the call." It was always something with him. Mom would give me an apologetic smile and promise to call back later, but we both knew she wouldn't. After a while, I stopped expecting her to. A year later, Mom got pregnant again. She had a girl this time, my half-sister. I watched my family grow through a screen, feeling more like a distant observer than a daughter or sister. But I was okay with that because I had Dad. He was my constant, my rock, the one person I knew would always be there for me. Until he wasn't. I was 16 when it happened. It was a rainy Tuesday evening, and Dad was driving home from work. The other driver ran a red light. That's all it took, one moment of someone else's carelessness, and my whole world imploded. I remember every excruciating detail of the next month. The antiseptic smell of the hospital corridors, the steady beeping of machines, the sympathetic looks from nurses as they checked Dad's vitals. I did my homework in the ICU waiting room, praying to whoever might be listening that he'd open his eyes. But Dad never did. He slipped into a coma, and 2 weeks later, they told me his injuries were incompatible with life. I held his hand as the machines went quiet, and just like that, I was alone. Well, not entirely alone. Dad had made sure of that. He left me everything, the house, his investments, enough money to put me through any college I wanted. He planned for every contingency, except for the one where he wasn't there to see me grow up. But I was still a minor, which meant I needed a guardian. And there was only one option: Mom. The day after we buried Dad, they arrived like invaders. Mom, Robert, my half-brother, and the baby. They brought suitcases. "Honey," Mom said, trying to sound gentle but coming across as condescending, "you can't live here alone. We're moving in, all of us. We'll be one big happy family." I stood in the foyer of my father's house, my house now, watching them track mud across the floor Dad, and I had just refinished last summer. One big happy family, right? Because that had worked out so well before. This is for the best, Megan. Mom continued, already hanging her coat in the closet like she belonged there. You need your family around you right now. They didn't even wait a day before starting to erase Dad from our home. I watched in stunned silence as Robert methodically took down every single photograph of Dad. The one from our fishing trip to Montana, the candid shot of Dad teaching me to ride a bike, the formal portrait from his law firm. One by one, they disappeared into a cardboard box. These should probably go in the garage, Robert announced, like he was talking about old magazines instead of my memories. Clear up some wall space. Mom was already pulling frames from her own boxes. Pictures of her new family, her other children, their perfect little unit that didn't include Dad or me. This one will look nice over the fireplace, she said, holding up a professional family photo of them at the beach. I gripped the banister so hard my knuckles turned white, but I didn't say a word. What could I say? Dad had only been gone a month, and they were already painting over his existence like a stain they couldn't wait to cover up. You know, Sarah, Robert said, studying the walls with his hands on his hips, that renovation James did really wasn't well thought out. The flow is all wrong. Mom nodded, running her hand along the crown molding Dad had installed himself last summer. I never liked these dark colors. They make everything feel so gloomy. Don't worry, honey. I'll redesign it all, make it more suitable for our family. Robert pulled out his phone, already scrolling through paint swatches. We could start with the living room. I'm thinking a nice bright yellow. I wanted to scream that Dad had picked these colors because they reminded him of his childhood home. I wanted to tell them that the wrong flow of the house was actually perfect for our Sunday morning pancake races to the kitchen. But grief sat heavy in my throat like a stone, and I couldn't force the words out. So I just stood there, watching them plan the demolition of my last connections to Dad. A month passed in a blur of silent dinners and avoided eye contact. Then came the day that broke something in me for good. I came home from school to find our driveway full of cars and the sound of laughter spilling from every window. The backyard was full of people I'd never seen before, all clustering around Dad's grill. Mom. I found her in the kitchen, arranging appetizers on Dad's serving platters. What's going on? Oh, honey, she beamed, adjusting a welcome to our new home banner. We're having a little housewarming party. I invited some friends and family over to celebrate our fresh start. The word celebrate hit me like a slap. Dad's only been gone 2 months, I said, my voice barely a whisper. How can you have a party? Mom's smile faltered for just a moment before she straightened her shoulders. Life goes on, Megan. We can't put everything on hold forever. No one canceled joy just because James died. But if you're going to be like this, she added, her voice taking on that edge I'd grown to hate, you can just go to your room. I won't have you standing around with that sour face, making everyone uncomfortable and ruining our celebration. I looked around at the strangers in my house, drinking from Dad's crystal glasses, putting their feet up on Dad's leather ottoman, laughing like this was any other party on any other day. Without another word, I turned and walked upstairs to my room. Behind me, I could hear Mom's voice, bright and cheerful. Who needs more wine? I kept telling myself things would get better, that Mom would remember she was my mother, not just their mother. That maybe, just maybe, we could find some way to be a real family. But every day, that hope got a little smaller, a little more fragile, until it was barely there at all. Then came that family dinner. We were all sitting around Dad's antique dining table, the one Robert kept talking about replacing with something more modern, when he cleared his throat in that way that always meant trouble. Megan, he said, folding his hands on the table, we need to discuss the sleeping arrangements in this house. I paused with my fork halfway to my mouth. What about them? Well, you see, there aren't that many bedrooms, and you have the largest one, the master bedroom. He glanced at Mom, who suddenly became very interested in her plate. Tommy's starting school now, and he needs his own space. He can't keep sharing with the baby. All that crying keeps him up at night. My stomach dropped. What are you saying? We think it would be best if Tommy took your room. Mom jumped in, still not meeting my eyes. He's a growing boy. He needs his own space. And where exactly am I supposed to sleep? I asked, my voice shaking. Mom brightened like she'd been waiting for this question. You can move into the baby's room. It'll be perfect. You can help with the night feedings, and we won't have to hire a babysitter anymore. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. I'm tired of getting up every time she cries. Mom continued as if we were discussing something perfectly reasonable. This way, everyone wins. You get to spend more time with your sister, and we save money on childcare. You want me to give up my room, Dad's room, so your son can have it, and then be an unpaid babysitter. The words felt bitter in my mouth. Don't be dramatic, Megan, Robert cut in. We're trying to make this work for everyone. No, the word came out stronger than I expected. Absolutely not. This is my room. Dad's room. I'm not giving it up. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. Mom's face hardened, and Robert turned an ugly shade of red. How dare you? He exploded, slamming his hand on the table. After everything we've done for you, taking you in, making sure you're not alone. Taking me in. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This is my house. You ungrateful little. Robert stood up so fast his chair fell backward. All you think about is yourself. We're trying to build a family here, and you're being completely selfish. We're your family, Megan, Mom added, her voice sharp. Your only family now. You need to start acting like it. Go to your room right now, Robert shouted, pointing toward the stairs. And don't you dare come out. You're grounded until you learn some respect. I pushed back from the table, my chair scraping against the hardwood floors Dad and I had refinished together last summer. Grounded, in my own house. The absurdity of it would have made me laugh if I wasn't so angry. The moment I got to my room, I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and called the only people I knew would understand, Dad's parents. Grandma picked up on the first ring. They want to what? Grandma's voice crackled through the phone as I explained everything between sobs. They want to take your room. Oh, honey, don't you worry. We'll be there in 20 minutes. True to her word, exactly 20 minutes later, I heard the distinctive rumble of Grandpa's Mercedes in the driveway. Then came the sound I'd been waiting for. Grandma's signature rapid-fire knock on the front door. I crept to the top of the stairs to watch what was about to unfold. Grandma didn't wait for an invitation. The moment Mom opened the door, she swept in like a storm front, Grandpa right behind her with his briefcase, the one he only brought when legal matters were involved. Sarah, Grandma's voice could have frozen hell over. We need to have a chat about boundaries and respect. Mom's face went pale. She'd always been intimidated by my grandmother, even when she was married to Dad. Now, faced with the full force of Eleanor Mitchell's rage, she looked like she wanted to disappear into the wallpaper. Mrs. Mitchell, I can explain, she started. Oh, I'm sure you can, Grandma cut her off, pulling papers from Grandpa's briefcase. Just like you can explain why you're trying to rearrange a house that doesn't belong to you. Making plans to redecorate rooms you have no right to touch. Trying to move my granddaughter out of her own bedroom. We were just trying to make things work for everyone. Robert tried to interject. Grandma turned on him so fast he actually took a step back. You don't get to speak right now. She slapped the papers down on the coffee table. Dad's last will and testament, property deeds, all of it. This house belongs to Megan. You are here on borrowed time, living here solely because she's a minor who needs a guardian. And let me be very clear about something. That arrangement has an expiration date. Mom's hands were twisting together nervously. What do you mean? I mean you have exactly 2 years until Megan turns 18. The day she becomes a legal adult, you and your entire family will need to find somewhere else to live. This is her house, not yours, not his. She jerked her thumb at Robert, and certainly not your son's. But we're her family, Mom tried. And if you continue trying to bully and manipulate my granddaughter, Grandma steamrolled right over her. I will personally finance a custody battle that will make your head spin. I have more than enough resources to prove you an unfit guardian, and then you won't have to wait 2 years to move out. You can do it immediately. I'd never seen Mom look so shaken. There's been a misunderstanding, she stammered. Megan must have misinterpreted what we were saying. We would never try to take her room. Save it, Grandma snapped. I've known you for too long to buy your backpedaling now, Sarah. Consider this your first and only warning. After Grandma's visit, Mom and Robert transformed into completely different people, at least on the surface. Suddenly, they were all smiles and sweetness, like some bizarre parallel universe version of themselves. Would you like pancakes for breakfast, dear? Mom would ask, her voice dripping with honey. I remember they were your favorite. They were Dad's favorite, actually, but I didn't bother correcting her. Late one night, I overheard them talking in the kitchen when they thought I was asleep. We need to keep things quiet, Mom whispered urgently to Robert. We can't risk losing this place. Do you know how perfect this location is? Tommy's school is just around the corner, and everything we need is within walking distance. We'd never find anything this convenient in our price range. I know, Robert muttered back. Just 2 more years. We can manage that. But they weren't managing it alone. Grandma had become my guardian angel, calling every single day like clockwork. How are things today, sweetheart? She'd ask. Everyone behaving themselves. Every 2 weeks, she'd show up unannounced, inspecting the house like a drill sergeant. The first time Mom tried to plan another party, Grandma shut it down with one phone call. This is Megan's house, she reminded Mom coldly. Any social events need to go through me first. The best part was watching Grandma remind Mom of the ticking clock at every opportunity. You should start looking at rental listings, Sarah, she'd say casually during her visits. 2 years will go by faster than you think, and the housing market is so unpredictable these days. That's when Mom would switch tactics, cornering me when Grandma wasn't around. Her voice would go soft and pleading, her eyes wide with manufactured concern. Honey, you know how expensive rent is these days, she'd start. Robert's the only one working, and with 2 kids. She'd trail off meaningfully, letting the guilt settle like dust. When that didn't work, she tried a different angle. You'll be off to college soon anyway, she'd say, trying to sound casual. 4 whole years in another city. It doesn't make sense to leave the house empty. We could take care of it for you, keep an eye on things. It would be a shame to let it sit here gathering dust. She never mentioned that it was Dad's house or that every corner held memories of him. To her, it was just real estate, convenient real estate that she didn't want to lose. We'd treat it like our own, she'd add, not realizing the irony of her words. They already were treating it like their own. That was the whole problem. I never responded to her hints about staying in the house anymore. What's the point? We both knew where this was heading. The calendar on my wall has a date circled in red, my 18th birthday. My Independence Day. Last week, I sat with Grandma at her kitchen table, planning my future over her famous chocolate chip cookies. I got accepted to Berkeley. I told her, sliding the acceptance letter across the table. Dad always said it was a great school. Grandma's eyes welled up with tears. He'd be so proud of you, sweetheart. I've been thinking about the house. I continued, dunking a cookie in my milk like I used to do when I was little. I want to rent it out while I'm at college. Not to your mother, Grandma asked, though I could tell from her smile that she already knew my answer. No, just speaking that aloud made me feel stronger, and I sat up straighter. I would prefer for strangers to reside there. They will at least acknowledge that it is not their home. Grandpa suggested a property management business, which I've already gotten in touch with. Finding renters, collecting rent, and maintaining the property are all things they will take care of. I've already written the notice giving them 60 days to find a new location, but Mom isn't aware of this yet. I got advice from Grandma's attorney with the language. I occasionally feel bad when I'm by myself in my room, which was Dad's former room. Family should come first, right? Wouldn't Dad have preferred that? However, I recall how rapidly they attempted to seize control, how enthusiastically they sought to remove all evidence of him, and how they only behaved differently after realizing they would lose their free pass. It was Mom's final attempt yesterday. She caught me in the kitchen and said, "You know we love you, sweetheart. We have done everything for this family. Your dad would prefer that we remain together." Right there, I interrupted her. I looked her in the eye and said, Dad would want me to defend what's mine, to stand up for myself. And I'm going to do precisely that. No matter who lives there, I will always think of the house as Dad's. However, it will soon be populated by people who realize they are only visiting and are not attempting to claim it as their own. They will pay the going rate for the right to live here, rather than attempting to coerce others into staying. And me. In ways that cannot be stored in a garage or put in boxes. I will be in California, creating my own life and keeping Dad's memories with me. My own mother was kicked out, which some could consider harsh. However, I discovered the hard way that sometimes you need to keep your distance from the individuals who should be closest to you.